Bernard McGlinchey, secretary of the Letterkenny Swimming Pool Committee, presides over a bingo session, profits earmarked for the swimming pool. But for all the activity in the Golden Grill, the people of Letterkenny have had a long wait for their still unbuilt pool.
It's a long time, yes. I bought the site for the swimming pool in 1958 for £200. The site is now worth about £78,000. But at that time, I gathered a few of my friends together. I was very young and just did it. 1955, we formed the committee shortly after my election to the Urban Council, and we set off to gather money for the swimming pool. Before the Urban Council would get sanction, it is necessary for a local committee to put up 20% of the cost of the pool. And the council may not do so out of rates. This has to come as a local contribution. And this meant that we have to raise over £20,000 as a local contribution. And it's not easy raising £20,000. But we are now in a position to hand over the money, and we hope the pool will start.
The swimming pool, though, seems to be just one of the amenities which Letterkenny lacks. There is a golf course, but there's a dearth of other sporting facilities and still no community centre.
It is true that at this moment we have not these amenities. And I would agree that this is a problem, one that we must give our attention to. There are plans for the swimming pool. There are plans for a community centre. There is a boxing gymnasium, a new one. There are quite a number of sporting organisations, and it is up to each one of these to meet the challenge of the future. And I feel that if the population is there to justify the expansion of these clubs, that this expansion will take place.
Quite honestly, I'm afraid that Letterkenny doesn't really know what's going to hit it. And I'm rather looking forward, while very hopefully and with a great deal of pleasure, to the expansion that I know is coming industrially. At the same time, I feel that we're not moving fast enough at all to accommodate those who will come to be employed here. That is, if the employment figures are anything like projected, which is somewhere around 1,500. And as I say, I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid of that from a housing point of view, services point of view, schools and all the various entertainments, community centres, lack of swimming facilities, playgrounds, spaces and so forth. All of this, I'm afraid, we'll find ourselves very much lacking in to a very, very major degree.
Money is a big problem. If you get money, the people who are taking the money from the county should put some of the money back in the county. For example, in my opinion, these insurance companies that are taking money for life insurance, they should give us some of the money back to Donegal, and no better place than Letterkenny to start it with.
We're known as the forgotten county, you know, and there's a lot to be said about that too. If you look at our roads, look at this hospital as we drive in here, 100 beds for the whole county. Absolutely ridiculous. I've come up here and anointed people on the corridor. In fact, one night in particular, I remember anointing 2 people who were so ill that they had that they were being anointed on the corridor, you know. And there's plans for this place. I'm here 6 years now. I saw the plans on a wall in here 6 years ago. Nothing has ever come of it. And you know, what do I do? It's rather, it's very unfair to, first of all, the patients, of course. Secondly, the staff, the nursing staff and the doctors. It's impossible to do the job they would like to do with such small space available. So what we really need here is a much bigger hospital. Just as we need quicker action in regard to schools, less prefabricated buildings dotted all around the place. And we'll be going places then. Hi, Margaret. How are you? Hello, John. Come on, can I get to here? Well, that's the Come on, that's the Cello. Cover the one glass. As recently as 2 nights ago, I listened to a representative of the North West Health Board say that eventually the hospital would be 3 times its present size. But I would go so far as to say it needs to be certainly half as big again immediately, at this very day. It's totally unfair. to patients in Donegal, to staff working in the hospital, and to staff, both nursing staff and medical staff, to have to work in overcrowded conditions. And it is overcrowded, irrespective of what anybody says.
These big firms in Dublin, where everything seems to accumulate, should send some of the money back to Donegal. Guinness's and, as I said before, the Irish Life, or people like that.
But if Dublin is allegedly neglectful, will Brussels perhaps be more caring? Letterkenny lies in the heart of an area which hopes to benefit substantially from EEC regional funds. So the arrival by helicopter on an autumn day of the man in charge of the Common Market's regional policy, George Thompson, is important to Letterkenny.
Mr. Chairman and gentlemen, I'm first of all very glad to be here, and I'm secondly very sorry to be here for such a really disgracefully short time, and I do apologise to you that it is such a very rushed visit. But I am anxious to see as much as I can in the time that's available to me on the ground of some of the development problems in Ireland.
Your home ground. But good to see you.
Yes, yes.
Very hard TD.
The signs are that the question of a decision on the Regional Development Fund is now likely to become active again over the next month or two. And I've had too many disappointments to wish to raise my own hopes unduly, far less to raise the hopes of those who are most directly concerned. But the present proposal is to start with a 3-year fund, which would probably be around 750 million pounds over the 3 years. And there would be two main types of grant. One would be assistance to the Government of Ireland in terms of its direct grant to individual industrialists setting up factories in areas where they're required. And the other, and I think a very important aspect, would be a direct grant to the public authorities in Ireland for infrastructure projects, for public expenditure projects in water power, electricity, all the basic services necessary for development.
And before doing so, once again, I must thank him very sincerely for coming. Yeah. Would you make it very short, Councillor?
Yeah, make a short comment. I'm unlike most of the rest of the people here today. I was bitterly opposed to Ireland's membership of the Common Market. And I would like to point out to you, now that we're in it, Mr. Commissioner, you've said that the purpose of your regional fund is to keep people in Donegal and to provide us with a better standard of living. Well, I would say to you, you need to speed up your regional fund, because since entry to the Common Market, the standard of living of the Irish people has drastically fallen. Thousands of our farmers are threatened now with bankruptcy. We read in the papers every day of the continuous rise in the cost of living, and thousands of workers are threatened with redundancy. If you don't speed up your regional fund, this regional policy, there'll be no people here in Donegal left to provide a better standard of living with. Thank you.
Well, perhaps I could just comment in a couple of 2 or 3 sentences on both of what has been said. If I may take the last point first. I'm glad to have this expression of view, because it's the sort of thing that helps me in my own fight back in Brussels. I've always taken the view that the European community is no shortcut to solving all our problems. But I think membership of the European community gives you a better chance to solve them than you have if you're on your own in the kind of rather dangerous modern world that we've all got to live in. The fund would be used very closely related to the provision of employment. That the fund is people-orientated and ought to be directed to providing the maximum amount of job opportunities for people in the areas which will enable them to stay there and have a decent future. But the fund by itself is not nearly enough. What we need are really comprehensive, good plans on the ground in the regions themselves. And I think Ireland, the Republic, is really rather well equipped in doing this sort of homework. And I'm really tremendously impressed by what you've just been describing to me about the kind of work you've been doing. I do assure you that this dossier will be studied carefully and in detail by me and by my own experts in Brussels. But one must never forget that the purpose of it is to create a decent way of life for the people of the community. And is therefore to try to give to people in Donegal, for instance, to young people coming out of your schools and colleges here, the right to choose to stay in Donegal and to have a decent life in Donegal if that's what they want.
One man who very definitely wants to stay in Donegal is a young Letterkenny journalist, Pat McCart, one of the first graduates of the Regional Technical College. For him, as he travels around the area, there's apparent contentment with the local way of life. Brighter city lights leave him very definitely unattracted.
I don't like big cities. I must be a country person. But it's small enough, you know, to be friendly and big enough to be impersonal. There's, I think, about 15,000 people surrounding the Letterkenny, you know, area and 6,000 in the town itself. Like, that gives it a big enough impetus to be a big town, you know, from the point of view of entertainments and so on, but not big enough to be sort of impersonal. Letterkenny is basically an independent town. It's been doing all right without court halls, and I assume it would do all right even if they didn't come.
One young man's view of the future, complacent perhaps. Sean O'Donnell, though, is among the pessimists. The young official Sinn Féin urban councillor outspokenly criticises the existing housing situation, feels that political opportunism rather than genuine concern brought the town both the Regional Technical College and the Courtaulds factory, even though the latter was announced only after the last general election. He feels that blinded by prospects of jobs and money, local people overlook the problems which face them.
My opinion about the town in 10 years' time is this: it's not a very good picture. In fact, it's gloomy. Because I don't believe that any great revolutionary change is going to take place in this country in the immediate future.
Over 5 years. 5 years waiting for a house.
Courtaulds factory is going to come. It's going to give a lot of employment. There's a lot of people going to come into town to work. Therefore, there's going to be a lot of money in circulation. The local government, from my experience, local council, does not have the money at its disposal. And it's fairly obvious to me that the government, irrespective of whether it's coalition, Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil, is not willing to provide the money, to provide the social services that will be needed.
I think it's a pity that Dublin didn't help us more when they had the power and the administration there with their civil service. Well, we're as northerners by nature, and I think we would find the northern people more direct, as it were, as we are ourselves. As far as we're concerned, or as far as CAE is concerned, we don't exist at all in Donegal. They only came here recently when they bought up a few small railways that were doing badly. But as regards tourists, they never have them advertised at all. Donegal doesn't exist for CAE. So it's Killarney all the time. But we have the beautiful scenery here and marvellous places for tourists if they were only waking up to the fact.
Charles Kelly, typical in many ways of the type of traditional businessman which Letterkenny has known. The family milling business goes back over a century, to 1860, when his grandfather, another Charles, leased a corn mill from the Watt family beside a celebrated private salmon fishery, the Ramelton Pool. Nowadays, the firm has expanded into the importation of timber and coal, and into hardware. The headquarters are in Letterkenny itself. It's typical of a successful small-town enterprise, traditional and conservative. Its owner extremely critical of Dublin-based administration, and in his case, almost self-consciously northern. Charles Kelly, then, member of a respected Letterkenny family, which in his father's time put the seal on their success story by buying what had been the local landlord's residence at Ballymacool. But the comfortable life of a Letterkenny businessman is far from Pat McCart's mind as the young reporter goes about his duties. This time it's a tramp up a muddy laneway to see the local rugby team, for Letterkenny fields a team with players drawn from as far away as Gweedore, going through their paces on a Sunday afternoon. Pat McCart, young, modest, a person of already self-confessedly simple tastes, unattracted by the thoughts of living in bigger communities. He shares with Charles Kelly a love of his local surroundings, his fellow townspeople. But will the quality of his life inevitably have changed in 10 years' time?
Well, 10 years' time, be 31 then. I assume, I suppose, be married. living somewhere, preferably in Letterkenny. Living a normal sort of bourgeoisie sort of life. Nothing sort of exceptional about it, just an ordinary life. In fact, if I make that much, I'll be happy enough. No, I'm not a very ambitious type of person, just like the simple things in life. Money or some, great position in life just doesn't, I wouldn't mind it, like, if it came along, but if it didn't come along, it wouldn't worry me a terrible lot,
Come on, Letterkenny, get that ball! You couldn't tackle your granny gonna drown the fire.
Is bagach in Sedón atá có flúirse agus atá có site có masin ó híh cultúr na naíochta agus atá tíor chonel. Náide is bagach ar a dón a me ábalta hacht meor mar hampla ná iascare a bheith ábalta scéal mór fada, epic mór fada nósa Virgil's Aeneid a ahris focail ocail. Tá sin ar fáil I dtíor chonel. Tá seanathe go fáil I dtíor chonel. Tá tradition mór ceáil in sa chunda seo, tradition mór cultúr agus is míon linn tarint ar an cultúr sin agus is míon linn más féidir chur le